I'll just start today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that we're all on today and pay my respects to elders past and present and extend my respects to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people here today. Now, the other thing I would like to do before we get started is just get a bit of a feel of the vibe. What I want you to do is jump into the chat now and pick an emoji that best reflects, or a couple of emojis, that's fine. An emoji that kind of reflects your vibe today, how you're feeling. So jump into the chat, chuck in an emoji that really captures how you're feeling right now. In the chat, guys, in the chat. Leah's feeling good. She's feeling cool. That's good. How else are we feeling today? Come on, folks. Hello, hello. Have we been using the chat today, Andrea? I'm going to be using the chat. Guys, how are you feeling? Give me an emoji. Is it just you and me, Leah? Do we know where the chat is?
I'm pressing my button. So how about I put a word in?
Oh, there we go. All right. Now they're coming in. Donna's feeling good. Dean is feeling a little alien-like. That is good. Melissa is hungry. Oh, my God. We need to get you some food quickly. Good. All right. There's a bit, it's a bit of a strange day for those, in, Melbourne. We've got some freedoms today, which is very exciting. So yeah, I'll be using the chat today. So please don't, allow me to hear my echo in silence here. I'm a bit of an extrovert, so I need constant affirmation and love as we go today. So jump in the chat. If you've got any questions, Andrea will read them out as we go. So as Andrea introduced, my name is Michelle Fotheringham and I am a corporate escapee. I worked inside people and culture functions across a range of different organisations for about 15 or 20 years before I stepped out and went solo. And I bloody loved it, so much so that I started Workling to support organisations who want to tap into this type of corporate escapee talent and also help people who want to work in this way. So today I'm going to look at the case for on-demand talent. Now, you might call them freelancers, professional gig talent, independent consultants. I tend to refer to them as on-demand talent, but we'll look at them from a few different perspectives. So we'll really, start to look at the business need, the talent need, and also look at how we can start to kind of practically design and resource work that enables the way that a lot of people want to work and the flexibility that organisations need. So work design, I guess, isn't really the sexiest of all, talent topics, but it really started in the Industrial Revolution where machine-operated work tended to replace smaller craft-based industries. And then in the 20th century, all in the name of productivity, jobs became even more repetitive, doing the same thing over and over again, and workers, particularly in a more manufacturing context, were tied to the line. And you could possibly argue that things haven't really changed too much. Perhaps the lines look a little bit different, but we're kind of still tying people into lines. We've continued to design work into jobs, meaning kind of a role that a person holds within an organisation to do a thing. And this has really started to inform our definition of talent. It's been quite narrow. When we talk about talent, typically we're talking about employees doing jobs. No doubt you've had a whole host of talk around the future of work over these last few days. And, no one really knows what the future of work is going to look like. It would be super helpful if we could, but we don't. So all we can really do today is look at those signs and symbols and, trends and patterns that give us a clue of what the future might look like. And then we can not only prepare for it, but actively start to shape it as well. Because what we do and we don't do today as people and culture professionals and talent acquisition professionals really does shape the future of work. So we've done a heap of research before we launched Workling, and also given the crazy rate of change over the last couple of years, have really continued in our research. So we look for the those signs of change that I just spoke to, and have really spoken to hundreds of leaders and talent to understand their experience and their needs. And what it's done is really validate for us is there are signs of change on both sides of the market. So both talent preferences are changing and what organizations need from their workforce is changing. So not only is it about the future of work, but it's also about the future of workers. So we will start, we'll have a look at both sides of it, but we'll start with talent. One of the first things that I really noticed that started my interest in this whole topic was the sheer number of people that I saw opting out of in-house jobs to work for themselves. And the thing that really stood out to me was it wasn't the shit people. I'm allowed to swear, I think, Andrea. It wasn't the shit people, making this leap. It wasn't, the lower performers going, I'm going to go and have a crack working for myself. The thing that was really obvious to me was it was the top performers that were making this leap. They were the ones that had the track record, the reputation, the network, who could really thrive as working as on-demand talent. And, we talk about signs and clues of change to come. And towards the end of 2019, which, feels about 50 lifetimes ago, this was one of those signs that really stood out to me. And I guess we've gone on to learn, a whole lot about this on-demand talent community since that point. We actually recently did a survey of our talent community, and we asked them if they had any intention of returning to traditional employment. So those that are working as, freelancers out on their own, if they plan to, at any point in time, resume kind of back in that traditional employment to step into a job. I would love to for you to head into menti.com. You can either access that over your phone or on your laptop. So you probably don't need the link in the chat, but maybe Andrea, if you can just drop that in, menti.com. And I would love you to just have a estimate around what percentage of on-demand talent do you think plan to return to employment. So you'll see menti.com up the top there, and the code is 17628953. We've got one vote coming through. Thank you. Someone's nice and quick. I'll give everyone else just another minute to pop their thoughts in. I'll have a little sip of my chai as we go. It's very awkward. See, I'm very bad with silences. I just feel them and talk to myself. We need some background music. All right, so the percentage of on-demand talent who plan to return to traditional employment. So we'll give everyone just another sec. So we will be using Menti a couple of times today. So if you just want to keep that open on your phone or on your screen, that would be awesome. So we surveyed our talent community and asked them if they had intention of returning to employment. And it was actually 10%. So 90% of people have no intention of returning to a job. So this starts to tell us that it's not a transient community. It's not a community that's in between jobs. They have made an active choice and have opted into a different work model. Now, this is quite important to understand as talent acquisition professionals, because these are not people who are going to be applying for job advertisements. They are not in that market at all. So only 10%. And that 10% are people well, if my dream job came up with my dream organization, I would probably go for it. But there's a whole lot of caution and kind of tentative thought process around that. And 90% just have no intention at all. So the next question, I guess, is why? Why do we think people want to work in this way? That is a very good question, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it. So again, jump into Menti, and I'd love to hear your views on why you think people are opting out of in-house roles and want to work on their own as freelancers, on-demand talent. So jump into Menti. The code, I think, should be the same. Freedom. Awesome. Yep, freedom, choice, flexibility, balance, variety. Awesome. I'll give everyone another few minutes. Lifestyle, independence, life changes. Yep, awesome. Look, you guys have a pretty good read on what some of the drivers are, and certainly that flexibility, freedom, independence, control, paving their own path, choice, lifestyle, like that is absolutely what we heard. Let me just flip over to the next one. So we haven't actually shared these results with anyone yet, or shared them even on our blog yet, but this is what we heard when we asked. So definitely standout number one, why talent are opting into this work model is to have more flexibility and freedom in how they work. And, you know, we're not talking about office or home here. We're talking about the how and the when they work. So whether that's around family or health or well-being or what have you, it's that flexibility and ability to design their own weeks is really important. And that, as I said, kind of standout number one. The other one that I think it's worth talking to is the last one there, around doing work that plays to their strengths and their values. It's been really interesting. One of the things that I've found quite surprising over the last kind of 18 months or so since we started Workling was people are quite selective in terms of the gigs that they want to take. You know, it's not this desperation to, you know, jump at any opportunity that comes up. People are really selective. And, you know, quite often I'll call someone to chat about a gig and they're like, oh, it's not, I could do it. It's not really my sweet spot. You know what? I think so-and-so would be awesome at that. So they're really, you know, they know where their sweet spot is. They know the work that fills their bucket and where they can make the greatest contribution to an organization. And that's where they want to play. So I think, you know, this idea of flexibility and also values and strengths aligned work isn't a new concept. Like, we know that's really important to people. But what's interesting to note is it's becoming more important. And this is one way that people are getting it. So I guess, you know, I was about to jump onto something else, but before I move on from that point, I had a really interesting conversation with one of our worklings recently, and he is someone who has done, you know, a heap of really good work for Workling. He's been in where has he been? Australia Post, Endeavour Drinks Group, you know, a whole heap of smaller organisations, as well as doing his own stuff. Awesome guy. And he told me that he has set up job alerts to come into his inbox every Monday morning. I was a bit, you know, sad to hear that, and also a little bit shocked because, you know, I thought it was, you know, all going pretty well for him. So I asked, you know, tell me more, like, tell me why you're doing this. Why have you decided to go back in-house? And he was actually doing it as a scare tactic for himself. This was his motivation each Monday morning to, you know, keep talking to people, to find that next gig that excites him and that he loves, and, you know, keep showing up and nailing every piece of work that he takes on, because he doesn't want to have to apply for these jobs. Which, you know, obviously, I mean, no disrespect to anyone working in-house, of course, which is basically all of you guys. You know, there's awesome benefits to working in-house, but for these people who have opted for an alternative, you know, it's just not what's for them, and they are quite passionate in their view not to return to work. And I think, again, you know, lots of awesome things about working as an employee, but for this cohort of talent, they have made an active choice to work in this way, and they're not going back. So I guess beyond, you know, what we have heard and the research we have done as a part of our journey, there's no shortage of other data points that support this. There was a survey recently that suggested that 20% of employees are considering jumping over to freelance. And look, you know, even if, let's just say that this has been inflated, or, you know, you don't quite buy the 20%, even if it's 10%. And if we have a sense that it's the higher performing employees that are making this jump, even 10%, you know, even your talent pool that you're talking to shrinking by 10% is going to be massively impacted. We know that in Australia, probably more so than any other country, people do want to have that control and over their work, and there are no restraints in their schedule. We know that's important. And, based on the data I just showed you from our research, we know that's one of the reasons why people are opting into freelance. So I think that's another interesting data point and an interesting clue and indicator around where the market could head. In terms of actually sizing the gig economy and talking to the growth of the professional gig economy, it's bloody hard. The ABS, all the numbers get a little bit mished together in terms of contractors and independent consultants, and whether you're an Uber driver versus a higher paying freelancer, things can get a little bit messy. But we know that economy is growing. There's numbers suggesting that it's ninefold over the last 4 years. In the US, they see that higher earning freelancer, so someone who is working more in this professional capacity, that group is growing, is reflecting 20% of the workforce. So there's plenty of data points for this side of the market. What I'd love you to do, Andrea, if you wouldn't mind just breaking people up into tables, I would love people just to have a bit of a conversation with some of their peers around what they've been seeing with these changing talent preferences. If they've been seeing anything, what have you seen or heard? What might it mean for you as a TA professional? So, Andrea, if you or Michelle, if you just
Michelle, what I'll do is I'll turn the presentation off. How long would you like them to talk to? And then I'll turn.
5 minutes would be awesome. And if you can just have one person at each table putting a few notes in the chat, that would be amazing.
Terrific. Good. Here we go, folks. So pop notes into the chat as you're talking. If you
had someone on our table who had recently made the jump from internal out to working freelance and on a gig basis. So it was, just awesome to hear. Oh, Andrea. Oh, no, Andrea's here. Andrea's gone. Awesome. I've seen a little... can you provide an overview of the typical occupation groups that are freelancing? Yeah, awesome. There's obviously a huge variation there, and I think it's more normal, I guess, in the tech space. Within Workling, and I guess the community that I typically work with, kind of that professional services space. So within our community, we've got right across the people and culture, landscape, marketing, communications, strategy, and experience design. So they're the types of groups that we're working with. I guess I've learned there's probably some roles that are less inclined to work on an on-demand capacity. Sales is a good example of that. I've had a lot of startups who are like, I just want a salesperson kind of on a bit of a retainer, or, in, a set, a number of hours per month. So that sales capacity I've come across less of. Another capacity I've probably come across less of is change managers, only because they tend to do those bigger chunks of time. So with change managers, you see more 6 month, 9 month, 12-month contracts rather than kind of outcome-based work. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next section as well. So we've talked about the talent preferences. Now let's kind of flip over to the other side. I've completely lost my notes. Oh, there we go. Let's flip over to the other side and look at organizations' changing needs. Organizations, as we've seen over the last few years, really need to become more nimble and adaptable. So yes, we've got the way talent wants to work, but this other side is what organizations need. And the signs of change, again, don't know the future of work, but what we see today is really playing out on a macro level and a micro level. At the macro level, there's probably no bigger sign than a global pandemic. It was really the mother of all disruptions. Market conditions changed overnight. Revenue streams for many businesses were turned off. For some lucky businesses, there were new opportunities that appeared overnight, and the workforce changed really quickly. And I'm not just talking about remote working or working in the office, working remotely. We're talking about just the type of talent and the scale of talent we needed. And of course, we saw a lot of redundancies last year. So, and then the rehiring of those same people and talent acquisition was a prime example where that played out. So while it might not be another pandemic, and I effing hope it is not another pandemic anytime soon, but future disruption is all but guaranteed. It could be climate, political, technology. We know what is possible and the huge impact it can have, not only at a work standpoint, but at a society level. But our workforce need to be able to respond to that and augment and change around market conditions to remain competitive. We can then start to look at this idea of kind of workforce agility at a micro. Can we not? I've not shared my screen. Thank you, Christine. You saved me. If we then kind of take it to a micro level, so we've looked at the macro, the bigger context. If we take it back inside an organization or even within a team, we can see that we need more agility. We've designed these teams based on the assumption that we have the same capabilities at the same organization at the same time. However, the reality is that the type and the volume of work is really variable. The way that we design work and our lack of agility at the moment has a range of different impacts. And for you guys, it can be, the difficulty filling roles, but also there's a very real impact on people's mental health. We know that workload is one of the key drivers of burnout, and we're kind of cramming all this work into jobs. And in an environment where we know that the work volumes change and what's needed at different times change. So we know that this workload is a key driver of burnout. We probably didn't need a study to tell us this. Gallup did one anyway. But we know that there's some really, significant impacts around this workforce agility. Again, it's not all kind of workling observations and data. There's no shortage of data to suggest that a more adaptable and nimble workforce is a huge business priority. This top statistic kind of blows me away. So nearly 60% of its CEOs emphasize the need to aggressively pursue operational agility and flexibility over the next few years. How are our talent strategies doing that? If we've got CEOs saying we need more agility and ability to augment our workforce and our operations, how are we enabling this? There's 65, I think Mercer reported more like 77%, but 65% of executives agree that freelancers and gig workers will substantially replace full-time employees. Now, not even I would probably go that far in terms of substantially replacing employees. I feel that there's absolute space for both types of work. But then when you reduce the kind of severity of that statement from substantially replace through to somewhat important or very important to an organization in terms of their competitive advantage, basically all leaders are agreeing. So it kind of brings us back to the question of what are our people strategies? How are we tapping into these talent sources to enable this? If leaders are very clearly saying we need a more dynamic and agile workforce where we can bring talent in and out as needed and augment what our people do, the people strategy needs to enable that, and the type of talent that we need to bring into the organization needs to enable that. I'd love to maybe we won't break into tables now, but I'd love everyone to just quickly pop in the chat what their kind of reflections on this are. We've, looked at changing talent preferences and now this organizational need. What does that kind of bring up for you? And in particular, the spaces where talent acquisition might need to play in the future. If you can just pop some thoughts in the chat, that would be awesome. Yeah, thanks, Andrea. I think, the role of, hiring managers and getting them to think differently is really important. And we'll move on to some really practical things that you can do in that space. Yeah, influence to think differently. Yeah, thinking differently about work preferences. Cool. Yeah, I think it's just simply not a place that many talent acquisition teams are playing in. So I think, we can kind of see that there's a perfect storm brewing. On one side, we've got talent who want to work differently. On the other side, we've got organizations who want to be more nimble. And then we've got this, looming talent shortage. We won't get into that now because I'm sure you've, spent a fair chunk of time talking about the Great Resignation over the last few years. But, I look at this and, hopefully putting my biases aside from Workling, but it's kind of a perfect storm. Like, why wouldn't we be thinking differently about talent within our businesses? And of course, this is why, I've decided to step in this space. It's not all of the future of work, but there's some pretty clear clues here that this is a place that is going to be really important in the future of work. So this begs the question, like, so what? Where do we bloody start? Like, tell us what to do now, Michelle. I'm going to talk to 3 things that I think we really need to face into when we're starting to talk about this perfect storm. And it really starts with, how do we define talent? We've always taken a pretty binary view here. You're internal, you're talent, or you're external, you're a supplier, you're a vendor. Our people and culture teams, our talent acquisition teams really look at that employee base. That is who talent is. That's who we talk about. That's the focus that we take. But I would really argue that anyone doing work in an organization is talent. These are the people who are delivering the work, who are forming the culture, who are, delivering on those business objectives. So, the shift that I see is moving away just from thinking of employees as talent to anyone who's coming into that organization. Again, I'd love you to just jump back into Menti and look at where your definition of talent as an organization is today and where you think it might need to shift to in the future. Do you agree with my my vision of the future of work, or have you got some other thoughts there? So I think the code is probably the same as the last time. So how do we define talent today as an employee, as people doing work in our organization, and what do you think that needs to look like in the future? So I'll give you a minute just to jump in there. So we're kind of in the middle. We're probably thinking a little bit broader than just employees, maybe contractors as well today, but certainly thinking that we need to take this broader view of talent in the future. Yeah, good. And I think, as we saw in those statistics before, there's probably different versions of, the severity of this shift that we're going to see. And it's really something, I guess, that has been quite outside of talent acquisitions space to date. So it really is a bit of a shift. So what does that broader view of the talent ecosystem look like? This is how we talk about it and how we see it. And we start to see work falling into 3 different categories. So job-based work and talent, project-based work and talent, and service-based work and talent. So job-based work is work that's been designed into a role or a function that has a number of accountabilities and priorities and is really a core capability to the organization. Quite often there's a time-based factor here. So we need someone 5 days a week permanently, or 3 days a week for a 6-month period. So we tend to size that need around time. For project-based work, it's designed around a deliverable that talent is engaged to deliver that output or that outcome. So come in and review our remuneration framework and provide recommendations. Come in and design and facilitate an executive strategy session. Come in and deliver this marketing plan. So we're bringing in talent for a specific need. For service-based work, it's around the provision of an organisational capability that possibly isn't core to the business. So at a larger scale, that might look like a, corporate IT help desk. For a smaller business, it might be, PR capability. It's not something we need internally, but it's a service we require on demand. So you'll see on-demand talent can play across both of those 2 spaces. So when we go down to the different talent segments who are delivering this work, so employees obviously doesn't really need a definition here. Anyone working on an employment contract, whether that's permanent or fixed term. Contractors, we define as anyone employed by a different party, so working as a third party through a third party payroll or a labour hire, who are engaged again for those lengths of time. It's still job-based work, so you're bringing someone in to do a job, usually for a fixed period, whether that's 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is. It's quite important to differentiate between the contractors and on-demand talents. We know that it's really important to understand our customer personas when we're talking about a product in market, and it's equally important for talent. And there's quite a differentiation there. So contractors, as I said, are coming in and being engaged from those 6-month, 12-month contracts. But for the on-demand talent community, I will often have people call me and say, Michelle, I need a HR business partner full-time for the next 3 months. Can you match me to someone? And sometimes I can pull something out of the bag, but quite often I can't, because this talent work in a way that they're working on multiple different projects at a time and very rarely have that capacity to be available on a full-time basis for a period of time. And we know, as we discussed earlier, is that's just not the way that they want to work. I was chatting with Tamara when we had our breakout groups, and she was talking about working across 4 different projects, 4 different clients at the moment. If you call her and say, come in and do this contract for a 6-month period, she can't do that. If you say to her, hey, can you come in and do a review of our talent strategy? Yeah, she can come in and deliver that outcome. So I think, we've tend as people in people and culture and TA to kind of bucket the contingent workforce into this one bucket, but they are 2 very different personas. So I think, that's why this kind of view is quite important to us. And we can start to see that on-demand talent is a substitution for when you're bringing in big consulting agencies. And I know we just had someone speaking from EY there, so I won't trash talk at all, but there are some pain points that organisations are experiencing with big consulting, and certainly we're seeing more and more people looking for on-demand talent as an alternative there. So yes, it is an employment alternative. It's also an alternative to be engaging consulting agencies or service providers. On some levels, I think, perhaps this view of the ecosystem system isn't that different, but I think what it does do is it drives our talent acquisition teams and our talent strategists to have just a very conscious conversation. So if we are still just focusing on employees and maybe contractors, that's okay, but that is a very deliberate choice. So these are the other parts of the talent ecosystem that we're not playing in. And it may look different in different components. It may be actually, we have a very light touch. We have some high-level tools and advice for these components, and we play a more kind of hands-on coaching the manager role in these elements. But at the end of the day, this ecosystem represents the people doing work in your organization that are impacting the culture of your organization, that are impacting, the commercial outcomes for your organization. So I think when we talk talent, it's, just really important to have that broader view. And we'll come back to the pros and cons of some of these a bit later. So let's move on to how we actually design the work. So we've looked at, what talent means for us. And then we look at, how we're designing the work to bring people in. I'm going to whiz through this pretty quickly, and I'm very happy to come into your teams and do more of a deep dive. But what we'll focus on here is really how you start to differentiate between the jobs and projects or gigs. So probably no different to how it is today, a leader will come to you with the work that they need talent to come in and do. Now, at the moment, that's typically represented in a PD or some sort of job advertisement pro forma that you have. But looking at that, you can start to break down what is that work that actually needs to happen. And that always starts with what is the business purpose and the business imperative here. this doesn't need to happen at a detailed level, like super high level. But once you have a clear picture of the work that needs to happen, it's then just work. This is a 5-minute exercise of starting to get strategic around the job design. And look, hopefully this is done before it gets to you as the talent acquisition person, but you also have a place here to influence it before it goes to market. What I would look at when you start to look at the work to be done is how and if it varies based on the complexity and the frequency. So often you see within these job descriptions is a mix of low complex and high complex work. So low complexity work is the work that probably most people could do with minimal instruction. High complexity work, you're looking at work that requires a significant level of experience. Now, a common job advertisement that I see, particularly for smaller businesses, is bringing in their first marketing role. So you're bringing in this marketing manager. It's this mishmash of activities of, defining the brand and, creating the marketing strategy along with posting social media content. Now, that type of work just varies significantly on the level of complexity. So you're kind of either paying for someone up here and you're paying too much for some of the work they need to be doing, or you're bringing someone in at a more junior level and trying to stretch them to the point that they can deliver the marketing strategy, or you're kind of going in the middle and you're not quite getting the strategic capability you need, and that person probably doesn't want to be doing the lower complexity stuff. This is a great opportunity to go, well, how can we actually tease this work out and design it in a different way? Similarly with the frequency, there's sometimes within roles, there's a real mishmash of the capability you need all of the time and the capability you need some of the time. A good example of this is within kind of corporate people and culture teams where they want to reinvent their performance management processes. So they bring in a, senior, rather expensive role to kind of undertake this process. But the reality is there's this upfront design component of it and strategy component. And then it's BAU implementation after that. You don't actually need someone at that heavy hitter strategic level all of the time. So starting to tease that work apart and go, actually, what we need today and what we need tomorrow might look a little bit different. So how can we start to resource the different needs at different times? So it might be, I suppose, another example of this is an internal comms team or a PR team. Internal comms team is a good example where you need, it might be actually we need 3 people within our internal comms team, but at certain peaks in the year around, our engagement survey or annual report, we need a bench strength of people to actually scale up that team. So by starting to tease apart, how does the complexity of the work vary and how does the frequency or the timing around that work vary? It can help us to start to challenge how we need to resource these roles. So you've got your little post-it notes or what have you with the different activity. You've now started to look at how it might vary on complexity and frequency. Of course, everything can be put into a 4-box. You give me anything, I can 4-box that bastard. But if you start to look at this work and step back on whether that's with the HR business partner, whether it's with the leader, to actually go, we've bucketed, you've suggested this as a role, but when I start to tease it apart, it looks a little bit differently. So here's some variation that I can see around what you need at different times, how we can start to access the right capability at the right time. We want to kind of probably avoid bucketing all of this work together of different levels of complexity. And actually, there's some different skill sets you need at different times. I would be interested in maybe just jumping in the chat and just hearing what are the roles that you come across. I'd love to hear, whether this is resonating. What are the types of roles that you have seen maybe recently come through to you where there just has been a bit of a mishmash of needs moved into a role? I think, I spoke to a marketing example. I think, in a corporate context, sometimes it's a learning manager. So this role is, we need someone to design leadership programs Oh, they also just need to coordinate all of the enrollments for all the BAU training. Oh, and they're an internal coach as well. There's kind of a range of different complexities there, and there's actually quite some different capabilities you need at different points in time. Yes. Yeah. Admin work and yeah. And I think, stripping out of the admin in a lot of functions, I think has just resulted in paying a lot for people to do less complex work. I know when I was in internal OD roles, I was getting paid, really good money to run, programs with leaders and run leadership workshops, but I was also typing up all the notes afterwards. Like, that is just not, a great use of my time or the organization's money. Christine has shared about the, lead consultant doing training and this and that and architecture and solution design. Yeah, awesome. And I think, as we're starting to, if a job isn't designed sensibly, it really impacts how you can go out and find that talent in the market, but also, the experience of that talent once they come on board. So just challenging, how we bucket this work together, then starts to look at how we resource it. So if you're not a 9-boxy type person, these are some questions that you could possibly be asking your business partners or your leaders or whoever you're kind of working closely with, just to start challenge the thinking. So if you don't like the post-it notes in the 4-box, do you need more or less of this capability at different times? Do you think this complexity all kind of sits at the same level, or can we split something out here? Is what you need today the same in 4 to 6 months? So just starting to create a few questions that work for you, just to tease apart how that flexibility, that complexity and the timeliness of the work plays out. And of course, as I said, this is important because it influences the type of talent we need to bring in to actually deliver the work. So once we get a better feel for where the work can sit, we can start to look at what are the best talent models to deliver the work. And you can start to steer the leader towards the right talent solution. Now, there's no perfect science here, but the main message I'm really trying to get across is that not all work needs to fall into jobs. Say it with me. Not all work needs to fall into jobs. Put it in the chat. You can say it with me there. But we're starting to look at, of course, for that work that happens all the time, that employee base makes a whole lot of sense. There's a whole lot of efficiencies and, cost savings there. Oh, Andrea, you're back. Am I running out of time?
Wrap it up, Michelle, because I've got one more presentation and we finish at 1.
Sure.
Sorry.
I will definitely wrap it up. So different work models you can bring talent in to deliver the work. So just looking at, where on-demand talent in particular makes sense is where it's that sum of the time work and it's more complex. And where you've got different options within that box, you can start to look at different measures to actually look at where the value is. So the pros and cons around the affordability, the visibility, and the value. So just a couple of sourcing tips for on-demand talent. Tap into your leaders network, but also start to curate your own. Talk to other on-demand talent to find out where the good people are. What we've learned more than ever is top talent, no top talent. So start to curate that talent pool just like you do any other segment of talent. Treat it as an ongoing relationship. While it is short-term work, these people will be people you can bring in and out. Leave them on the bench when you don't need them and bring them in when you do. Think of the talent experience, not just the employee experience or the candidate experience, but we're starting to talk about the broader talent experience. And, you know, what would a presentation be without a shameless plug to find a trusted platform to extend your network? So we kind of, you know, literally just believe that top talent knows top talent. We started with the awesome on-demand talent we know were high performers and asked for their awesome connections who they've worked with before. So find a partner that you can work with there. Your brain is probably hurting. So I know Andrea's about to give me the hurry up. We've talked about the why, we've talked about the how, and I'm very happy to chat with anyone who wants some more information after today. Sorry, Andrea, I got talking about my favourite thing.
It was my fault. We lost some time in chat because I got chatting at a table, which was really bad. So I've just put Michelle's LinkedIn profile there, folks. If you want to talk more with her or explore this, pick up the phone or connect with her on LinkedIn. Michelle, thank you. Said, like, I think actually this has started to resonate with quite a lot of people, that this is something they have to be thinking about. Pop in the chat group, folks, if that's what you're thinking, because I think that. I'm going to get you to turn off your camera and microphone and turn off your presentation, and that should be disappearing any minute now. There it goes, Davo.